My name is Jacqueline Harper. I have begun my work to discover the supernatural, and today I will be meeting with an entity. There is always risk involved in meeting with these entities. Many, if not all of them, are highly dangerous. This one especially. I awoke during the night several times, as Selene continued to visit me again and again. I had a meeting in the evening with the latest supernatural being, and I had no desire to be late. The second entity I will meet and interview is Aleksanteri Toivonen, a vampire lord, born in the 11th century and said to be arrogant beyond belief. However, he is said to have a strict code of ethics in regards to humans, and I have been assured that I will be safe. I've heard that before. I wanted to know more about him, and perhaps after last time, this was a foolish idea. I sat at my desk and looked through my notes. Most were already typed up. Rumor has it that he was a Viking and lived many lives. Much of it is mysterious. All shadows of the past. His name is known, yet many of the details are hazy. The hotel I agreed to meet him in is extremely old, utterly expensive, and beautifully designed. There are several conspiracy theories about this place, and I had to admit that I felt out of place here. I walked in and it was deserted. The hotel was deserted, except for a single clerk. He was an incredibly polite fellow who revealed nothing, no matter how many questions I asked. There was no negotiation on price. The room was ready to go. I knew better than to invite a vampire into my home, so I agreed with him. The room was already paid for. I arrived at the room first, and I began to get set up. I got my pen and paper out to jot down notes, and took my recorder out to make sure I didn't miss anything. I was left waiting. I twiddled my thumbs and fiddled, and began to look around the room. There are a few items that match the modern day, but there was a lit fireplace, and I had to admit it was getting hot and stuffy in here. Would it be inappropriate for me to remove my jacket? Did all vampires prefer to have things from the past around them? I didn't hear him open the door. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. He stood in the doorway before he entered. He had an incredible presence. The vampire was tall and stood at over 6 feet tall. I definitely had to tilt my head upwards to look at him. "Hello," I said and stood up to greet him, my hand offered to him. perhaps a little too enthusiastically. He looked at my hand as though it was filthy. I shuffled on the spot and looked down at my hands and tried to work out what to say. Meanwhile, he walked across to a chair and sat. He seemed to behave as though I was wasting his time. He waited for a moment before he gave the slightest gesture of his hand as an indication for me to proceed with the interview. I scurried to my seat, sat down, turned on the recorder. I grabbed my pen and paper to begin. For the sake of the recording, could you introduce yourself? And feel free to...
My name is Aleksanteri Toivonen. I was a wealthy landowner in my past life, and since then, I have lived a life of the night.
He cut me off. I glanced at the recording to make sure it was still going. It was. I began to sketch him loosely while he sat there to tell me about his life. And I wondered what other stories he could potentially tell me. How old are you?
My years as a human ended at 30 years of age.
He paused. I could have sworn he looked amused by the thought of his former mortality.
As for my years after that, there have been over 800 of them.
What species are you? He gave me an unimpressed, irritated look.
Vampire. Claudian bloodline, specifically.
He gave me an unimpressed, irritated look by the repeat of the question. Pardon? Is being called vampire potentially offensive to your kind? Instantly, I regretted the question. He seemed to scowl at me, and I felt like a student being glared at by a disapproving teacher. I pretended to look through my notes. Maybe there was something that I missed?
Perhaps a drink is in order,
he said, and left no possibility of protesting. He pressed a discreet button that I did not realize was there. A man entered silently, offered both of us a drink, and gave Alec a deep bow of respect. That man... Wait, he was the owner, the clerk I saw before. The same one that welcomed me in. He came in and offered him something that I couldn't see at first, before he offered me a selection of either wine or water. I went with the water. Thank you, I said first to my host, and then a secondary thank you to the clerk who left. How do you know him?
Oh, we have an agreement.
I thought, that was unhelpful. Care to elaborate on that? He seemed to be scared of you. I paused and looked at the door again.
He is here to serve me. And he does not wish to anger me,
he answered. There was a clear threat to his words, and perhaps I was being bolder than usual. The drink was simply water, so I could not blame it on that. Still, I had to know and learn as much as I possibly could. How did you meet him?
That is for me to know. And for you to not find out.
I see. Perhaps this was not the best topic. I sipped and continued. Do you have others who serve you in that or any other fashion?
Yes. Several.
Ooh, that was interesting. May I meet and speak with them?
No. You may not.
This was going nowhere. I let out a sigh of irritation and continued. Do other vampires have these, helpers?
Most do.
Interesting. I wondered why he was so hesitant to tell me about them. How do you take them into your service?
I acquire them based on my needs.
What kind of, needs? Oh, that fireplace, it was quite hot. Meanwhile, he looked at me as though that question was beneath him. I cleared my throat. It was quite strange. Perhaps it was best for me to get back on topic. You said something about the Claudian bloodline.
I did.
Could you elaborate on that?
The Claudian bloodline is the crude name vampires give to mortals to protect the real name. Or perhaps a Claudie was our sire. It is not for you to know.
Is it one of the most ancient bloodlines?
Yes.
How many clans are there?
Oh, many. Some are newer and are crude, vile, and unappealing.
And what are they called?
That, my dear Mrs. Harper, is none of your concern.
Why must he be so damn difficult? I thought to myself, and again continued with my notes. I also made a note of the different vampire clans and possible hostility amongst them. I remembered my information was minimal. I'd never heard of the Claudian clan. Hell, I didn't expect to hear any of this. And I really wanted to know more about the vampire politics. I made a quick note of it to ask him more about it later. Still, it was best to continue on with the interview. Where are you from?
Angerniemi.
He answered. Angel Nimini?
No.
Clearly not amused by my lack of ability to pronounce the name. I learned later on that native English speakers often have difficulties in pronouncing these names. much to the amusement of native Finns in the present day. I decided it was best to move on from that topic. When were you turned, and who turned you?
I was turned in the 11th century. I was turned by my sire, Valentina. My early years of being a vampire were spent with my sire, learning all the skills needed to survive. Feeding, identifying prey, and how to remain safe.
He answered. A hand moved gracefully as he explained each part. Oh, you're a lord. He looked angry at me for interrupting him. I gulped and looked down at my hands, suddenly feeling pretty ashamed.
I was a wealthy landowner. The culture was very different to the rest of Europe.
He answered, then continued.
Since then, I had to adapt to the changes of society, and my favorite sources of food have decreased in number.
Are you still in touch with your sire?
Yes, frequently. The bond is greater than anything a human like you could ever even begin to understand.
Well, what they said was right. That was that, I suppose. Will I ever get a chance to meet her? I would like to speak with her if I may. Ooh, do you have any vampire children of your own? He looked extremely irritated by my interruptions and multiple questions. However, he did finally answer me.
If she meets you, it will be on her terms alone. And no, I am yet to become a sire.
He said, and again, this only raised more questions. How does a vampire select someone to turn into their vampire, child? He looked irritated, but didn't correct me.
They need to be suitable. A connection needs to be made. And it needs to feel right.
He answered, and again, did not give me any specifics. It was so interesting. I kept scribbling more words down and sketching, adding on a few more extra details. The topic of feeding came up. I wanted to know what his favorite food was. It needed to be added to the codex. I had to ask, but I didn't really want to know the answer. What is your, favorite food source? I gulped and... Oh, it was for the codex. Everything was for the codex. The question hung in the air. And now it was out, it could not be taken back. His top lip curled in amusement, fingertips idly tapping along the arm of the chair, and in the blink of an eye, he was standing over me. He was already an imposing figure. My eyes widened in fear. His face, now close to mine. My heart rate increased and I saw the look of hunger in his pale eyes. I was frozen in place. And while I wanted to know as much as possible about these beings, I had no desire to become food.
Oh, Miss Harper. There are many places on the body that are ideal places to feed.
He whispered. A fingertip moved down my neck, and everyone knew that obvious place to feed. I watched as his gaze moved downwards. His hands lifted me from my seat, wrapped his arms around my stomach, and I saw my reflection in the mirror. Yet, I could not see his.
All the fast food, medications, and all the pollution in the air has decreased the quality.
He whispered. This time his lips were centimeters from my ear.
Its richness, the flavors.
His arms pulled me back against him, and I had to admit that it wasn't a particularly unpleasant sensation. Except the fact that he was a vampire and I was in danger, although that kind of,
It is now like eating cotton, unless you travel to the cleanest and most remote places of the world. They are not perfect, yet they are close.
His arms pulled me back against him, and I had to admit that it wasn't a particularly unpleasant sensation. Except the fact that he was a vampire and I was in danger, although that kind of, he seemed sad by this. The fangs. His canines were sharp, elongated, and ready to strike. I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable. Soon those fangs would bite my neck. Soon. But there was nothing.
Oh, Miss Harper. My favorite meal is the blood of virgins. And that, my dear, is simply not you.
And let me go. He let me go before he gave a polite nod and turned on his heel to leave, thus concluding the interview. This was my first interview with a vampire, and in many ways it only gave me more questions than answers. I ran my hand down my neck to make sure there were no bites, and breathed a sigh of relief. I bent down to pick up the notepad, recorder, and everything else I had brought with me. I needed to get home. The sooner, the better. Once everything was packed up, I made my way from the hotel. The lobby, again, was completely deserted. had a nagging feeling that I was being watched. I stepped into a taxi and it drove away and went back to my apartment. The questions kept circling in my mind. I reached the foyer and looked around. Again, deserted. As I walked to my door, I noticed a treat. The word marked had been written in blood. I would like to thank my guest, Nordic Vampire, for taking part in this episode. He was actually the first person I told about the project and instantly came on board. He has one of the most recognizable voices and accents in the community. His readings by Edgar Allan Poe are amazing, and he has done many other fairy tales and stories. Definitely check him out if you have the chance. There are links to his YouTube and social media in the description below. Make sure you subscribe to him if you haven't already and let him know that I sent you. In my opinion, he definitely needs more subscribers. Let him know if you enjoyed his character. Do you want to see more of Alex? Let me know in the comments section down below. I would also like to thank Tanner Stokes for creating the exclusive soundtrack for the Harper Codex. His work is amazing and his links are available in the description below. Are you interested in taking part in the series or perhaps seeing a narrator in them? Please let me know. Get in touch with me on Twitter or Reddit. All my contact information is available below. Remember to stab the like button or gently caress it, comment and subscribe if you haven't already. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.